It appears that the 50s and 60s were a ripe kind of climate for the development of the concepts of child life or emotional aspects of care of hospitalized children.
Very much so. And, you know, in preparing for these interviews, I looked through some of my old files, and I am not very well organized in all that. But I found one program here, which we had started in April '58. That means 3 years after the program really came into, which was called Child Life and Education for Hospitalized Children.
And this was at the county hospital, or city hospital.
At the city hospital still, yes.
Now.
Yes. Now it was already county hospital at the time. I just see on the program, So, and there we got some help from Cincinnati under child psychiatry, as well as Taft under child psychiatry, had programs. And we got the head of child psychiatry to be with us, and the rest were our own people.
So now, people were thinking along these lines elsewhere too.
Definitely. There is no question. The 50s were a place where these thoughts started. Or Mary Brooks from Philadelphia, who had started there also, it came over to that meeting in '58.
Is that right?
Because we had made contacts with each other before at some of the also psychiatric meetings. And so I let her know that we had this meeting here.
Yes.
I had contact also with a project in New York in child psychiatry, where the person who worked on it and her advisor, who was somebody similar to Dr. Wagoner for me, would come. They came in '56 even to see what we did with these little children, because she was working only with very young ones there. So somehow the knowledge spread, and I think it spread because Dr. Robbins had sort of a godfather feeling about it, and he would tell in a joking way and say, we have something you don't have with your fancy buildings. We have something here and there. And then some of these people came and asked me to come and tell them what we were doing here.
Well, you wrote your first book, Working with Children in Hospitals, and that was published, what, in 1961?
Yes.
And that also was something that Dr. Robbins was very proud of and
he wrote the preface. And so he, from then on, well, actually, that must have been even a little earlier. When was that? No, 62. That was about the same time. I just found that also, I've completely forgotten about it. That was a scientific meeting sponsored by Cleveland Metropolitan General Hospital, where all sorts of medical problems were discussed. And I was included to present Preparing Children for Operations. You know, but this inclusion, I think, facilitated the acceptance of the program here and made it easier.
There were other events, too. Robertson in England, is that right, did films on reaction to separation by children. And
very impressive films. And Bowlby's book, which came out very shortly after the war. You know, the war experience had really played a great role in giving an impetus to all the things that mattered here.
That's right.
Separation of families, that came through these early beginnings. Then
Prue was another writer. Is
that's
that
right?
Yes.
Was it 52 or 3? It was fairly early. I'm sorry, I don't. But anyhow, I think it was before Dr. Robbins came to Cleveland, which was 53, because they were at the same time at Boston Children's. And but that didn't get off the ground. It made a beautiful study, a study which is still quoted, but it didn't promote a program.
Not yet, anyway.
Yes. No, the study was perfect.
Yes.
But at that time, the antagonism of probably both administration and pediatricians who were geared to the scientific, under quotes, look at things, and were not quite open to the others.
Metropolitan General Hospital played really a role in giving child life a strong footing, though, by including you in conferences, and also had some conferences that were focused on children. I think you spoke at the scientific one on preparing children for an operation. There was one in 1965 on the mother and child bond.
Yes.
Again,
where we had Bowlby even, not Bowlby, Robertson. Robertson brought some of. No, we had some amazing luck in attracting people who were in the limelight at that time.
Yes.
And that's why it felt a little funny. And that brings us to the beginning of organized child life.
In 1965, yes.
When I got an invitation to Boston to get together with others who work in children's recreation. Now, I can be pretty snooty if it comes to terms, and I thought, well, recreation, sick children don't need recreation, they need something else.
That's
but
right.
I did go anyway. You know?
Yes.
And there was a group of 25 very engaged people in that field. The invitations had gone to people on the East Coast, which in a way was considered the intellectual life of the country. And I probably was included because the book was out and Dr. Robbins had come from there. And otherwise,
must have been other reasons too.
Otherwise, I may not have thought of as far west as Cleveland. Well, anyhow, I was there. And there came this strong enthusiasm about not letting it go at this one meeting, but trying to get other meetings going and maybe form an organization. And there were 5 of us who then, a year later, when the invitation came from Johns Hopkins, and that was a funny interlude. Boston Children's and Johns Hopkins vied for the privilege of being the most advanced in that field. And it didn't really help the movement very much because the difficulty arose, should that be a professional organization of child life workers? Or should that have a broader umbrella and include other people concerned with the hospitalized child? And finally, at the end of the meeting in Baltimore, the organization got started and would include others. I think with the proviso that unless you worked actively in child life, you would not be a voting member.
I see, yes.
On the other hand, we tried, I was the chairman of the first nominated committee, and because I did not want to be nominated, there was this fight between these two outstanding institutions, and I didn't want to be put in the midst of it. But I put 2 men, one from each institution, who were not child life workers, on the board.
I see.
And one was Dr. Brazelton, who has kept his loyalty.
Certainly has.
Until from then on.
Certainly.
So that we try to have the other professions like nursing, social work, child psychiatry, or pediatrics, always represented on the board. Later on, psychology came in. But child psychiatry has offered many most valuable participants of the board.
When was it officially called the Association for the Care of Children's Health?
I hope I'm correct. That's the name. And well, first it was called the Association for Care of Children in Hospitals.
In hospitals, that's right.
Which really fitted it.
Yes.
Then outpatient departments took a major role. Then reaching out into the community of preparing children before they came, all that.
Yes.
So the name, the first name, was given when things were constituted in Baltimore.
In Baltimore. What are your dreams for the future in health care of children, Nushi?
I had the chance to work with medical students all along, and my dream would be that every medical student should get at least a month where he is free of making medical decisions before he gets a clerkship, and be on a division to play with children, to observe children, to be shown around to different places, let's say a school for the blind, or all these things which a larger community has to offer, so they would know what children are like. And then they can get into what children's illnesses are like.
As a kind of final ending to a very fascinating history to both you and Child Life, would you tell us a little bit about the story of one of your patients that you had at Cleveland Metropolitan General Hospital, who is now an adult, and a very special story.
You see, this is one of the shortcomings of working with sick children, that you have them and then they disappear. Well, this youngster who had hemophilia reappeared when he talked to me in the medical library, and a very young man, came and said, "Aren't you Mrs. Plank?" And then he reintroduced himself, and we found out we had known each other very well for 12 years. And when he was 10, he also mentioned he wanted to go to medical school. Now he was somebody who needed a scholarship, and I wasn't quite sure that his health would hold up. So I sent the story he had written when he was 10 years old and hospitalized. Part of it I want to read you now as the end, to the dean of the medical school, who happened to become Dr. Robbins, who was my former chief. So he would know what this boy thought, and that's what he writes.
Now he's 10 when he's writing this story, while you and he were together at Metropolitan.
Yes.
Right.
Most likely, I have a lot more hospital visits ahead of me. But if they discover a cure soon enough, I might just have a few more hospital visits ahead of me. When I grow up, if I get there. I plan to discover a cure for hemophilia if somebody doesn't beat me to it. My other goal in life is to invent an anti-gravity belt or a serum that you can drink to have that power. A lot of people think that this is a silly idea, but I really mean it. People in 1900 laughed at the Wright brothers, and in the future the people of 2000 will laugh at me, but I really mean it. Somehow the circle got closed, that from being a very time-limited person in a hospital, one somehow can follow somebody's development. And he wrote after his pediatric clerkship to me that he really didn't want to become a pediatrician. It's much better to be in the playroom.